geschlossen.
Ja.
Und so.
Ja, elektronischer Scheiß.
Elektronischer Scheiß. Jawohl.
Wir müssen gemeinsam, aber da muss man irgendwie alle erst einmal zur Ruhe rufen. Und aufmerksam.
Good evening and welcome at the Diplomatic Academy for tonight's event, which is on the occasion of the World Press Freedom Day, which will be the 3rd of May, but we thought we gather here on a work day and not on a Saturday. It's a pleasure for me as director of the Diplomatic Academy to be one of the organizers here. Because what we do here at the Academy has to do a lot with the role of media in the changing world order, and the topic of tonight is especially artificial intelligence, and this is one of the issues we discuss a lot. It's a pleasure also to work together here with the club.da, so our alumni association, and also with the Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia, which has been founded actually in this space about 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. So we have 3 partners, and it's not being done for the first time. It's already the 3rd time that we gather to have 1 or 2 hours on discussing rather serious matters of press freedom in the world. I'm not giving you an introduction, I'm just welcoming you, but I'm not very optimistic as far as the future of press freedom is concerned. And this has partly to do with the you might call it the change in the world order that we do not know where it will lead to, but partly also because of the reaction of press and media themselves, because we all know that traditional press is really in a change process, a difficult change process, and there is no good business model, as far as I know, for an independent, surviving press without support by whoever the support wants to give. And as we know, if you're supported by someone, it's sometimes also not only the financial support, but also the interest of those who give the money to the press. But I don't want to leave you here the introduction with such a pessimistic view. The political pressure that is on a free press worldwide is overall still growing, but the fight against it is also growing. And I should mention possibly that the beacon of free press that we all thought that it's a beacon of the free press, the United States of America, is in a difficult situation as far as free press is concerned. But even there, I see that the reactions are quite promising from the civil society on the situation. My last point is, if we want free press, we need better education for everybody. I'm not talking about education for journalists. There are a lot of initiatives, also in Austria initiatives, but overall we know from the statistics the better the education is in any system, the more interest there is in a free press, which gives you trustworthy information. It's a long way to go, and we are discussing it in a country where still honey and milk flows as far as press freedom is concerned. But when we look to neighboring countries, even of Austria, it's not always the case. So that's why I'm very happy that we are joined here to discuss the possibilities and dangers that artificial intelligence and the changing world order will actually represent to what we all aim for, a press freedom safeguarding journalism in a changing world. So welcome from my side.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm the Vice President of club.da, and I'm happy to represent our club here tonight. I would like to thank Ambassador Brix, Emil, very much for being here personally for this event, to welcome all participants and audience, and also to the Diplomatic Academy for providing this space for us, and for Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia for the good cooperation in organizing this event, which is based on an agreement of cooperation that the two clubs signed back in 2022. Our club, club.da, was founded in 1969 by some alumni of the first diploma courses, and is one of the oldest alumni associations in Austria. It has now over 1,900 members in more than 100 countries, and we have 14 active local chapters in Europe and the Americas. One of the main goals is the support of the ever-growing global network of DA alumni, as well as to connect them with the current students, faculty, and staff. Scholarships and mentoring are other priorities, and we also cooperate with the Rotary Club in this context. Back to our evening tonight. In 1993, the United Nations General Assembly declared May 3rd to be the World Press Freedom Day in order to raise awareness of the importance of freedom of the press and remind governments of their duties to respect and uphold the right to freedom of expression, which was already enshrined under Article 19 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Since then, every year, the 3rd of May is a date which celebrates the fundamental principles of press freedom, to evaluate press freedom around the world, to defend media from attacks on their independence, and to pay tribute to journalists who have lost their lives in the exercise of their profession. According to Reporters Without Borders, last year 58 journalists were killed and 528 were in prison. For tonight's discussion, we have chosen a topic in line with the theme of UNESCO for this year, which is reporting in the brave new world, the impact of artificial intelligence on press freedom and the media. The focus lies on artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence affects press freedom, the free flow of information, media independence, and the global goal of ensuring access to information and protecting fundamental freedoms, as already formulated in the Sustainable Development Goals 16.10. The rapid growth and use of artificial intelligence is changing journalism, the media, and press freedom in a big way. While the principles of free, independent, and pluralistic media remain crucial, AI's impact on information gathering, processing, and dissemination is profound, presenting both innovative challenges and innovative opportunities and serious challenges. We will hear more about these questions from our distinguished panel, and I thank all participants for being here tonight on the eve of a public holiday. Let me now briefly introduce our moderator for this evening, Diana Mautner Markhof. She is the editor-in-chief of iGlobe News, also a staff writer. She is an attorney at law, has graduated from University of Vienna, has an LLM from Chicago Law School, and a BA in computer science from Brown University. She is also an alumna of the Diplomatic Academy. Before we start the discussion, however, I would like to invite Richard Murphy, who will welcome you on behalf of the Rotary Club. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As an alumnus of the Diplomatic Academy, it is great to be back. On behalf of President Tuba Ersoy and Rotary Club Maria Theresia, it's my pleasure as our club's Programme Director to welcome you to this timely panel discussion marking World Press Freedom Day 2025. We're delighted to partner again with club.da and the Diplomatic Academy for this event, now in its third year. Sadly, in a sign of the times, this conference on press freedom seems to grow ever more and more important every year. Columbia University's Global Expression Report 2023 notes that around 80% of the global population now lives with less freedom of expression than a decade ago. Reporters Without Borders warns that more than half of the world's citizens live in extremely dangerous places for press freedom, while fewer than 8% live in places classified as good or satisfactory. So if we think that press freedom is just an issue in Eritrea or Russia, we need to think again. Just this week, for example, The Guardian reported that the White House is waging an increasingly hostile campaign against the press, and I quote, pushing to control coverage in ways that go far beyond anything we saw during the president's first term. At the same time, artificial intelligence presents both unprecedented opportunities and serious challenges for journalism. From AI hallucinations to unclear authorship and intellectual property concerns, the landscape is complex. A recent Thomson Reuters Foundation survey in the Global South highlights this tension. While 80% of journalists surveyed reported using AI, nearly 8 in 10 of their newsrooms lacked any formal policy for the use of AI. Stephen Hawking once warned that the rise of powerful AI will be either the best or the worst thing to ever happen to humanity. We do not yet know which. Journalism is no exception in this regard. Ultimately, as AI becomes ever more intertwined with the media, ensuring that journalism remains robust, accurate, independent, and trustworthy has arguably never been more vital. Towards this end, in this brave new world of ours, I wish us all fruitful and thought-provoking discussions this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ambassador Brix, Ambassador Blaha. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here. Thank you all for coming on this eve of the 1st of May to celebrate World Press Freedom Day, which of course takes place on the 3rd of May, which we already mentioned. This day recognizes the fundamental principles of press freedom. In a special way, it gives us the opportunity to defend the media and remember those who have given their lives to defend press freedom. The attacks on the press come from real-life dangers, which we already mentioned. Brigitta already mentioned that, such as the killing of 232 journalists by the IDF during Israel's war on Gaza. This death count, by the way, comes from Brown University's Cost of War project, and as you already mentioned, I am an alumni of Brown University. Today, the attacks on the press also come from the digital world. And the topic of our panel discussion today, Press Freedom in the Age of AI, Safeguarding Journalism in a Changing World, highlights a systemic shift in journalism, which might forever change what it means to be a journalist. Our speakers will investigate how AI has impacted their work as a journalist, media watchdog, or advocacy group, all of whom are here present on our panel. So what does freedom of the press mean in a world governed by AI? According to the Oxford Dictionary, freedom of the press is the liberty to express opinions and ideas without hindrance, and especially without fear of punishment. The fundamental role of a free press is to deliver honest, objective reporting. Without a free press, there can be no democracy. The emergence of artificial intelligence could jeopardize this. Using AI means using the bias which comes with every AI. Whether it be DeepSeek, that does not allow negative answers about the CCP and ignores the existence of Taiwan, or US big tech companies, they all have a bias. As OpenAI states on its homepage, and I quote, ChatGPT is not free from biases and stereotypes, so users and educators should carefully review its content, end of quote. Reliance on AI without ultimate human control is dangerous and can lead, inter alia, to the proliferation of fake news. Quality journalism, and we have some great quality journalists here with us today, must adhere to a code of ethics, which first and foremost must question unreliable sources. Only thus will the public be able to make informed decisions based on information provided by the media. While AI technologies hold immense potential to enhance journalistic practices, they also present ethical and regulatory challenges. Automated content creation, algorithmic curation, and deepfake technologies raise concerns about the authenticity and integrity of information. Without adequate safeguards, AI could exacerbate misinformation, undermine trust in journalism, and erode the freedom of the press. Here to discuss these pressing issues today is an Ambassador Jan Braathu, Director Torokul Doorov, Edith Meinhart, Director Scott Griffen, and Sebastian Rosenauer. Let me take a few brief moments to introduce each of our panelists to you. Jan Braathu is from Norway and is the OSCE representative on freedom of the media. His prior assignments included head of the OSCE mission to Serbia, head of the OSCE mission in Kosovo, ambassador to Kosovo and Albania, and ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was also stationed in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Torokul Doorov is the director of Kazakh service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. He was born in Kyrgyzstan and studied journalism at Moscow State University. He has worked for a number of media outlets, including the BBC. His focus is on Central Asia. Edith Meinhart is an Austrian journalist, author, and podcaster who has been working as a journalist since the early 1990s. Her journalistic focus is on human rights. She has received numerous awards, including Vienna's Women's Journalist Prize in 2016. Very impressive. She currently co-hosts the investigative podcast Die Dunkelkammer. I'm not quite sure how to translate that. So I left it in German, which focuses on uncovering corruption and abuse of power. Scott Griffen is the executive director of the International Press Institute in Vienna. He holds degrees from Yale University, King's College in London, and Johannes Kepler Universität in Linz. His focus is Latin America, the Caribbean, and topics related to press freedom and independent journalism. And finally, Sebastian Rosenauer, who is currently a student at the DA. He also works as a freelance journalist and as a news editor for Rotary. He studied sinology and political science at the University of Vienna and is currently also pursuing a master in philosophy and economics at the University of Vienna. He has experience in using AI in his day-to-day work at the ORF. So now I would like to ask each of our panelists to make their presentation. I would like to start with Ambassador Braathu, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for the invitation to be here and to talk about this very important topic. World Press Freedom Day is a good occasion to talk about AI and its influence on the media. The AI, I think we all can agree, has had a profound impact on our information spaces. The concentration of power associated with AI, the lack of transparency, human rights due diligence, and accountability, as well as the use of AI for authoritarian means, threatens the very integrity, plurality, and independence of the information landscape. The ramifications for freedom of expression go beyond the right to seek, to receive, and to impart information to also affect democratic processes more broadly. And this is why the Representative on Freedom of the Media Office has been working on artificial intelligence and freedom of expression issues already for several years now. Independent, pluralistic media are essential elements for democracies, ensuring accountability, promoting individuals and societies with information of public interest. For democracies to thrive, the information environment must be conducive to pluralism and media freedom. However, today's information infrastructure is dominated by a few very large platforms that have amassed immense power as gatekeepers of information. They have become private arbitrators and global regulators of speech. Big tech is setting the terms and conditions for the access to reliable and public interest information. This is problematic. While this trend could be observed already for several years, it has now been profoundly exacerbated by the advent of generative artificial intelligence. AI-driven algorithms and generative AI have been transforming the ways in which information is produced, disseminated, accessed, and indeed processed. AI in content moderation and curation is shaping and arbitrating information, determining what is seen by whom and when. While we need media to have an intermediary role, facilitating public and political participation by providing reliable news and verified information, today increasingly big tech is setting the agenda in a monopolistic and revenue-driven manner. I sometimes say big tech is big business, and big business interests are at the forefront of their concerns. The advertising revenue stemming from prioritizing sensationalism, polarization, and disinformation is clearly at odds with accuracy, diversity, or the public interest. Generative AI is accelerating many challenges that we know from algorithmic, often biased content curation, while driving also a homogenization of content and further undermining the very concept of a shared reality as basis for democratic discourse. Opacity and flaws in the data used to train AI contribute to the perpetuation of existing discriminations, stereotypes, and biases. Also, language biases, limited understanding of local cultural and political nuances, and opaque decision-making. AI de facto limits diversity of content and often fails to adequately moderate hate speech, for example, incitement to violence, and mis- or disinformation, while over-censoring lawful content. As a result, legitimate political discourse, activism, and controversial yet important discussions appear to be unduly restricted. Recent shifts in policy and increasing collusion between tech and political power will likely lead to more inadequate moderation of content and a continued prioritization of revenue over public interest. This directly impacts an already complex relationship between journalism and big tech, a relationship characterized by growing media dependency on platforms and big tech for the collection, but mostly the dissemination of news content. And this results in a struggle for news visibility, which affects both access to accurate fact-based news as well as the economic and financial sustainability of media outlets and even journalists' safety. So the challenges go beyond the collapse of traditional advertising-based business models for news media. It extends to the unauthorized, unattributed, and uncompensated use of journalistic content to train AI systems. Big tech profits from advertising revenue generated through news articles shared and accessed online or summarized in generative search, while the media outlets that produces this content with high costs and editorial commitment struggle to survive. This is unsustainable. But let me be clear, information integrity requires quality journalism, grounded in professional standards and independence, and supported by sufficient, adequate financial autonomy. How to achieve this? This is a discussion that we must have not just here in Vienna, but we must have it in a wider context as well. It's becoming increasingly difficult, if not impossible, for the media to fulfill its crucial role in democracies, to cater for and to support peace and security, to provide information, to hold governments to account, to scrutinize those in power, to investigate and report on matters of public interest. AI does have opportunities, but it also has huge potential for the very opposite. And we need to be aware, and we need to try to find common ground within and beyond the media community to find some kind of regulation. Regulation can be many things, but we have to agree on what will be beneficial and work for that in practice. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Braathu. I do have some follow-up questions, but I thought we'd go through and have our presentations, and then I'll come back to you with my follow-up questions. Director Doorov, would you like to take the floor, please?
I hope now it works. Good. Thank you very much. Good evening. It is an honor for me to be in this very important discussion today on a subject that strikes at the heart of democracy and human rights, the freedom of the press. Thank you to Vienna School of International Studies, its Alumni Association, and Rotary Club Vienna Maria Theresia for invitation. It works, yeah? I would like to show some examples. And these examples will be from my daily job, from the work of our newsroom in Kazakhstan. I work for the RFRL, Radio Free Europe Radio Liberties, Kazakh service. And let me play a little bit this clip.
Как Акиму Костанайской области в последнее время поступают угрозы. Но хочу заявить открыто и прямо, я не поддамся давлению.
So this is Khumar Aksakalov, a governor of Kostanay region, which is on the border with Russia. About a week ago, 5 days ago I think, there was a video with him calling people for unsanctioned demonstrations related to Russia's propaganda event, Immortal Regiment, appeared in internet. And his office immediately reacted, saying that this is a fake video. It was generated by artificial intelligence. Even though the media reports, this is actually from KTK TV company page on Instagram, even the media reports showed that it was a fake video. Ordinary readers of those news on social media, I was reviewing several of them and on different pages, they were commenting about it as it was real. People even didn't care about the disclaimer or this information that it was a fake video. This is about the lack of knowledge in fact-checking, I would say. This is just one example, latest example, on how generative AI is sometimes being used and consumed in Central Asia. This is why the Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, where I work for the Kazakh service, as I said, is among those international media companies extremely careful in using AI tools in our daily journalistic work. We do not use generative AI to write any content that will appear on our websites or broadcast reports. We do not use it to create photos or videos or any like music, any other digital material. We use generative AI only for research, inspiration, or simplifying the planning of tasks, and sometimes for investigations when you have tons of documents and you need to have summary in a very short period of time. But still it needs human touch afterwards to check, to verify the information whether it is correct or not. Another example.
Үш жазбада Каспий құбыр консорциумына жасалған шабуылдан 4 күнге жуық уақыт өткенде, сағат 16:00 шамасында.
So, this is in Kazakh, my colleague Miriam is speaking. Let's have a look to another example of how we used AI sometimes in our work at the Kazakh service, for instance. We have a daily news program on YouTube. Its name is Azat News. At the beginning of this year, in February, there was a drone attack in southern Russia that hit a pumping station of the main Kazakh oil export pipeline. It was a Ukrainian drone attack. we noticed that several Kazakh members of parliament posted on Facebook very similar posts, basically demanding some sort of explanation from Ukraine. We had a very short time until the evening when we should run our show. And then my colleague, Miriam Bakhtshan, she put those Facebook posts into ChatGPT asking what similarities they have. And we were amazed. We didn't even expected that there will be some interesting moments that we didn't at the beginning saw. First, those 3 posts were made almost simultaneously. There was only about several minutes between their publication time, and their content, their meaning was almost identical. After taking this analysis from ChatGPT, she, together with the editor, immediately checked whether everything was correct, as I said, and true. And yes, they confirmed it was true. And that became our main story of the day. The question was, who might have asked the members of parliament to publish similar texts condemning Ukraine for this attack? Or they decided themselves to publish almost at the same time together similar posts. It was an interesting situation for the country, which officially takes a neutral position in a Russian full-scale war in Ukraine. And resuming everything, I would just tell that we are now entering a beautiful but unknown new world of artificial intelligence. Journalists in Kazakhstan are discussing now about the need of some sort of code of ethics in using AI for work, not only journalists, but in other spheres as well. Now in Kazakhstan, the parliament is discussing and adopting a law on AI. And now in different newsrooms, including RFRL, we're discussing issues of copyright, issues of privacy or leakage of sensitive information, etc. And these discussions, I think, are extremely important, and it's good that they are going on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing also these practical examples from your day-to-day work. That was very interesting. Thank you. We'll get back to some questions afterwards. I pass the floor to Frau Meinhart. If you can stand or sit, whatever you prefer.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, good evening to everybody, and thank you for the invitation to this panel. Artificial intelligence is a temptation. You ask a question and get an answer, and you follow up and get even more answers. Admittedly, it's quite fascinating. Apart from that, artificial intelligence is pretty helpful for a journalist for initial research approaches. Sometimes it gives me an idea that I might not have had, or sources I didn't think of. And if you know the subject reasonably well, you can judge the quality of the sources and decide which information you include and which not. I've also tried what happens when I ask AI to summarize my research in an article. To be honest, I was not convinced by the result. But it is now possible to have podcasts or even scientific articles 100% produced by AI. Maybe you would not recognize the difference if you were not paying close attention. As one of the hosts of the investigative podcast Die Dunkelkammer, founded by my colleague Michael Nikbasch, I can say that we have decided not to use AI for producing episodes. And one reason is our listeners do not appreciate at all fake voices. But will this still be the case for future generations? How much will people who grow up with AI value human voices, or linguistic refinement, or well-told stories, or reliable sources, or human-generated information, and in general, critical independent journalism? As a journalist, I cannot avoid asking myself, can or will AI replace me one day, and is that day near? Media companies are planning to have editorial content created by AI rather than humans, so I have to admit this scenario is possible, but I think it is not unavoidable. At this point, I would like to ask a few counter questions. Firstly, do you want to live in a country where the stronger ones drive over the weaker ones? Would you like to live in a society in which the powerful do not abide by the laws that apply to everybody else, or in which crime, corruption, and abuse of power remain without consequences for them? In other words, would you like things to be fair? It is the job of journalists to be a nuisance to the powerful and to bring the overlooked into the public eye, to make the voices of those who have no lobby be heard, ultimately to contribute to transparency, and to enable people to make, as already mentioned, informed decisions as citizens, and to play their part in a liberal democracy. And who else would fulfill this task? AI can create texts, generate news, it can even write entire books. It is easy to produce something that looks like journalism in a matter of seconds. AI creates images, which we cannot say whether what they represent exists at all, or whether is AI generated, but can you imagine the AI meeting with a whistleblower who is willing to report abuses? Does it travel to war zones to deliver first-hand reporting from there? Does it go to all the places where no one is looking to document what is happening there? Does it handle information and research according to journalistic standards? Do you think AI sees it as its job to defend press freedom against its enemies? Is it focused on being annoying for the powerful? Does it act in accordance with the ethical, professional standards to which journalists commit themselves? Does AI keep an eye on the balance of power? Does it reflect on its role in a liberal democracy? No, of course not. So that's my point. Critical, independent journalism will continue to exist if there are enough people who want it, who defend it, and who pay for it. And it will not survive, that's my also very pessimistic view, if it loses its friends and supporters, if there is too little awareness that power needs control. Sorry for sounding pathetic, but I'm convinced that this is the key. Critical, independent journalism will exist in the future if it is wanted.
Thank you very much. For this passionate statement for journalism, which I can only support. I now turn the floor over to Director Griffen. Would you like to please take over?
Sure. Thanks very much, and also thank you from my side for the invitation. I know the panel has a particular focus on AI, but because we are here on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day, I think it makes sense to say a few words about the bigger picture, as we've already heard a little about today, especially as this year is actually IPI, my organization's 75th anniversary. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about the bigger picture and how we defend press freedom for the future. IPI was founded in 1950 by 16 editors from 34 countries, including from Austria, what was then the Arbeiterzeitung. And in the shadow of the Second World War, they believed that the free flow of news and information was essential for mutual understanding, basically for creating a better world. And today we would probably describe it as press freedom contributing to creating and supporting free, just, and secure societies. But the fact is, and we've heard already about this today, that press freedom is under great strain globally and on numerous fronts. We are facing a situation where there is rising authoritarianism, weakening commitments to human rights, and attacks on democratic institutions. Journalists and journalism are under tremendous pressure in nearly every country and every region of the world. And we see this manifest in physical attacks and impunity for those who commit them, legal threats and harassment, cyber attacks, media capture, surveillance, and of course rhetoric targeting journalists as enemies and traitors, which was once widespread to a few countries, but has really become increasingly widespread, as we know. And of course we know that these attacks attacks and pressure on journalists and media freedom are happening in countries where it would have been difficult to imagine only a few years ago, and that of course includes the US. And I think it's really important to think about how we make our societies resilient while we can to these types of attacks, because we know now that really no country and no society is immune to pressure on press freedom. But at the same time, we also know that the need for strong and independent journalism has become more critical than ever, really. I mean, we have conflicts at the moment, global conflicts, regional conflicts raging in various parts of the world, in Ukraine, in Gaza, Sudan, and elsewhere. And also in these environments, journalists have been targeted or become casualties of these conflicts while reporting the truth. We have massive geopolitical shifts going on, of course. We have an environmental and climate crisis. We have a merger of tech and political power, as we heard before. And so the need for independent journalism to hold power to account, to surface public interest information, to encourage debate and help support solutions about the challenges we face, as I said, is as great or greater than ever. So I think there's no question that free society needs journalism, and that protecting press freedom as a fundamental right is essential. And journalism is resilient, and we also know that, and it's something that's come out a lot in our discussions and research about IPI's 75th anniversary. But it is something that needs support, and it needs broad-scale support. It needs a coalition of all those who recognize the fundamental value of the press, which obviously is the media and journalists and civil society, but it's also businesses and states that share these values to stand up together for press freedom. I think in terms of AI and press freedom, to come to the more specific topic, there really is a lot to unpack there, because there are a number of different angles that we need to look at when we talk about the relationship between AI and journalism. You have, of course, this existential question, this existential crisis. Will journalism survive AI? Can AI replace journalism? And I think, Edith, you gave a lot of powerful arguments why it can't, or at least it shouldn't. And of course, there are also sub-questions about the relationship between media companies and AI, also questions about intellectual property, for instance. You have this question of the pollution of the information ecosystem through information being produced by AI. You have the question of how journalism, of course, can harness AI for reporting purposes. As you mentioned, it can be a win. It can be something that helps journalists do their jobs, helps journalists investigate stories and reach audiences more effectively. You also have an investigative angle. The journalism needs to be looking at the actors and the vested interests behind AI, and be telling the stories about these powerful actors and powerful people and what they stand to gain from AI and who will lose from the AI revolution. And finally, you also have a press freedom angle in a narrower sense. And what I mean by that is the threats that AI poses to the freedom and safety of journalists at a basic level. How does AI put journalist safety at risk? Because in many ways it can. IPI is a membership organization, so this is something that many of our members are thinking about deeply, about these questions in the sense of the myriad of ways in which AI intersects with journalism and press freedom. And I think this is also part of our approach, which is to create spaces and possibilities for media organizations and journalists to come together and exchange ideas and strategies. And this applies not only to the question of AI, but also in response to the wider attacks on journalism and press freedom. And I think to meet what we see is a need for solidarity among journalists and to be able to stand up for colleagues under threat around the world. And that's one of our core missions at IPI. And I think also this has is in many ways never been more important because of the global scale of the attacks on journalists and the need for us to stand up together, both within journalism and together with other actors who believe in journalism to make sure that we can protect the future of media freedom at this really challenging moment. So I'll leave it right there and looking forward to the continued discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I turn the floor over to Mr. Rosenauer. The floor is yours.
So, first of all, I also want to say thank you to the organizers and to the Rotary Club Maria Theresia and the club.da for the possibility to speak here with these esteemed panelists. As a student of the DA, it's particularly interesting to be sitting on this side of the stage for once. And in my small presentation, I'd like to touch on 2 points. First, I thought I'd talk about my own experience in working with AI in the newsroom. And secondly, I'd also want to share my thoughts on the dangers of AI. Many things have already been said, so I might shorten that down. So I work as a radio news editor at the ORF, the Public Broadcasting Corporation, and we have our own AI environment. It's called the AI Dtor, and it's been developed in-house, but it also integrates third-party AI services. And for me, as I do radio, I mostly do technical things with it. I do things that usually you would need a sound engineer for, like equalizing recordings or enhancing audio quality. If you have a very bad telephone interview, for example, the generative AI can already make a very nice sounding recording out of that. And it has many other applications, like it can summarize longer reports, it can transcribe audio files into text, or it can generate online social media posts from a longer text article. And me personally, I only use it for the technical tasks because in the for creative work, I'm too skeptical using it. But we have very strict guidelines. We have very clear recommendations, or even we have very clear guidelines on how to label AI-generated content, and we have very clear indications on human oversight. Although I believe that this human-in-the-loop approach is maybe even too optimistic. I would rather have a AI-in-the-loop approach where we just use AI here and there to complement our work. But I think to maybe try to find something positive, I think if we manage to use it wisely, if we have good training, if journalists know how to use AI, know what it can do, know what it can't do, I think there's a potential that it helps us journalists with the technical things, with the more mundane tasks, with planning things, with just the more boring tasks of journalism, and it could free up capabilities for the really important journalistic work, like fact-checking, researching, generating unique stories. And I think it's a very optimistic view if you really believe that AI is going to enhance the quality of journalism. And this leads me to the second point. The second point is related to the economic pressure that media corporations are under nowadays. I also work as a freelance journalist, and it's particularly the independent, small media outlets that suffer in this environment, because the social media platforms is nowadays the place where most people get their information. And this is not a new problem. This is ever since the dawn of social media. We have this competition, this media landscape where traditional media outlets, newspapers, broadcasting corporations, but also small media creators have to be present on these platforms, because this is where information gets disseminated. And on these platforms, I think AI is also changing the landscape there, because nowadays everybody can make video files or audio files in seconds for almost no cost. And it has already been mentioned, for the advertisers, it's not so important whether content is genuine or not, because what's important is that it generates clicks. And if it generates clicks, it generates ad revenue. And for quality media, it's very difficult to compete in this environment, especially because newspapers like Standard or Kurier, they're under very strict media laws. They're responsible for their content, and I think that's a good thing. But big platforms, they're just intermediaries connecting content creators and consumers, and so I think it's quite a skewed playing field. And ultimately, the question that journalists have to face is whether we also want to participate in this race to the bottom, where we just try to generate engagement and attention, and we just want to play along, or whether we want to refocus on the thing that we do best and focus on quality, accuracy, reliability, and creating unique and personal stories. And I'm not all too pessimistic that journalists will find the right way in the right direction. And I'm very much looking forward to exchanging ideas with you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for this interesting contribution to our discussion today. So I will start off asking our panelists some questions, and then we'll open the questions to the audience. And I hope many of you will have some questions. There have been some very interesting talks and speeches today, and I think many good points that have been raised. Let me start with Ambassador Braathu with a question. You come from a multilateral organization. I know the EU has issued guidelines regarding what is a trustworthy AI, and they said that there has to be guidelines regarding the lawfulness, the ethicalness, how robust it is, both in a technical and social perspective. And I was wondering if you could share with us, also from the perspective of the OSCE, what such an AI governance system could look like. Who should put these principles together, and is it already too late for these?
No, that's a very good question. Is it already too late? Certainly it is late in the day. And somehow I feel that we're talking about this now as if it's a new topic, but it's actually been around for quite some time, and it's been developing. We saw people some years ago speaking about AI as a community service, altruistic approach, and then they discovered there was a ton of money to be made from this, and then they changed the approach very quickly. And that's why I say big tech is big business, and there will always be people who want to benefit from the big business. So how will we work in the OSCE? Well, we have 57 participating states, from Central Asia to, we sometimes say we used to say from Vancouver to Vladivostok. And these countries, these participating states, are very different. Different cultural backgrounds, different historical backgrounds. They have all subscribed to OSCE commitments on freedom of media, safety of journalists. Most recently, a Ministerial Council decision from 2018 on the safety of journalists. Now, this is my 4th month in the job, and I have to say that I question whether all 57 truly are committed to the commitments. But this is what I have to work with. And it is an organization based on consensus. So it takes only one participating state to say no to something, and everything is blocked. So consensus is a great thing if you can get it, but it can also be used in a very unhelpful way. So I have to maneuver. I have to try to keep a consensus. And what I have to work with is the Helsinki Final Act from 1975, various other commitments, Copenhagen criteria, Paris, Budapest, and more recently the Milan Declaration from 2018. And that's basically what the tool I have to use. I can say to participating states, look, you've made commitments. They're not my commitments, you have made them. And I see that you're in breach of your commitments. And here's what we propose to help you get back on track. When it comes to AI, it's still very early days, but there was, when I presented my first report to the Permanent Council on the 10th of April, the American delegation made a statement where they pointed out very clearly unhappiness with the European Commission, European Media Freedom Act, EMFA, and also the Digital Services Act. They pointed out that big tech companies are mostly American companies, and we will defend our companies. And so here I am talking about the need for regulation. Actually, what I'm talking about is to find an agreement on how we should all look at big tech, what should be the guidelines. And it's still early days. Now, my colleagues have been working on AI-related issues for a number of years. We are in the final stages of a process now to develop some guidelines. We've had a series of closed dialogue meetings with experts. We're going to have one next week in Brussels. And I hope that by sometime September, October, we will be able to issue some recommendations. It depends on the participating states whether they will want to do anything about it. Now, going back to the EU or the Commission, a lot of really good work has been done there, also by the Council of Europe. And we will build on that work and try to bring it into the OSCE environment. And then we'll see how far it flies. But I think it's important to have this discussion to sensitize governments on the very big challenges that we face. I understand that AI can have some very positive effects, and our colleague from radio was mentioning, if you know what you're doing and if you use it for certain things, it's great. But how many people really know what they're doing with AI? And Yuval Hariri, who I respect a lot, he's been talking a lot about AI and many other issues, trust, not the least among them. He was saying in a recent podcast, we don't trust each other. How can we possibly trust AI? It's about, we have issues with algorithms. But AI is algorithms to the 10th potency. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we have this discussion and we try to agree on some ethical codes, some rules for the editorial rooms, the newsrooms, on what is good practice. But what I'm really afraid of, I'm not afraid of, I think the journalists will want to do a professional job. But I'm worried about the media owners. I'm worried about those people who invest in media, in big tech platforms, and who are doing it because they want to earn money or they want to have influence. And I'm afraid if we don't hold the line, jobs will go. Not all jobs, but many jobs will go. And the media owners look at this as a business, profit. The public interest will not be uppermost in their minds. And that will be up to the RFOM and the OSCE to try to hold the line, but we can only do it together with all of you. And one of the previous speakers says we need solidarity. I think it was Mr. Griffen. We need to have solidarity, not just among journalists, but among the reading public, the general public. So I'll stop.
Thank you very much. So you, so you're hopeful that the OSCE could put together some guiding principles which might serve then as an example for other organizations by weighing different interests.
Well, we're going to do it, and then we'll see how far we get with it.
Very
but
good.
We're certainly going to do it. And when September, October comes around, we will present this, and we will have a number of meetings and events to try to present, or to present what our thinking is and what we think would be good practices.
Yes.
And then it's up to people to want it, as the previous speaker was saying. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I actually want to skip over to Mr. Rosenauer because you mentioned something which I think is very interesting, that many people don't even know what AI is, they don't know how to use AI, and the whole issue of training, and you had mentioned that one point, and I was wondering, since you are now at the DA and maybe closer to education than maybe other people, maybe you could share some thoughts about how could you train, especially also maybe journalists, to use AI in the correct way, and what would be your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, I think, because the use of AI is, although it's not new, we're all still experimenting with it, and there's no real, there's no program to learn AI, there's no training program, and we have some seminars, we get some explanation of how tools work, but in the end it's a very complex matter how algorithms really work. I think also that artificial intelligence is actually a little bit of a misnomer, because it's calculations that happen, and you got to really know how these machines work to be able to trust them and to know what you can do with them and what you can't. And I think it will grow with the use of AI in the general public. We will get to be more confident with it, we will get to understand it better, and it's definitely a luxury to have the own AI environment that the ORF is developing, but for the smaller ones it's very difficult because you have to use the third-party services, and I think...
But just to be clear, the AI that the ORF has developed was built upon, I suspect, ChatGPT. You didn't go out and program your own...
It integrates these services, but it tailors an entire environment to the needs of journalists. And what I was trying to say is it's a good thing that we have these technicians who know what they are doing.
Who know the code behind what's going on.
I hope so, at least.
Okay.
Right.
So the ORF journalists are trained with this AI?
Yeah, it's definitely, the direction is clear. We're going to integrate this in the workflow. We already do.
Okay.
It's not clear what's going to come in the future. I think this has to also develop along with how AI is used in society, because as also Edith Meinhart mentioned, or I think she mentioned it, that how journalists use AI is also very critical. People don't want to have artificial journalists. They don't want to have artificial voices or artificial presenters, but I don't think they have anything against journalists using the same tools that they use at home as well. And so the use of AI will develop like that.
So a good takeaway here is, first we have the multilateral organizations, we have big media organizations, and the ORF is definitely, when it comes to Austria, the biggest media organization. Also their responsibility in using AI, and maybe also their responsibility in maybe sharing some of the AI they use with other organizations that do not have such access. So that might be something also that we can take with us moving forward. Thank you very much for your answer. I wanted to go now to Director Doorov. You had mentioned a very interesting example when you first started talking about when there was this attack, and then you were suspecting that they were deep fakes, but then it turned out, I think, that they weren't, but it was still strange that they were all posting at the same time, and you don't know who was posting it. Did I understand that correctly? But the main question is, so what role does social media play in all this? It's something that's come up all the time. The role of big tech, of course, many big tech companies are involved in the development of AI as well. So how can you see that, how can we counter this, and is social media part of the problem at the moment?
Well, thank you very much for this question. I was talking about several Facebook posts, which were appeared almost in the same time, on the same topic, and the content was very close to each other. They were condemning the attack and demanding explanation from Ukraine. And they were posted by real people.
Okay.
Not just internet users, but members of parliament. And since they were appeared almost, I mean, at the beginning we thought they posted, 3 members of parliament posted almost a similar text. And that was first our kind of, question, why? And when we started digging, we found out that all 3 posts were appeared almost the same time. 1603, 1605, I think.
But were they genuine, or do you think someone hacked their accounts?
Oh, no. They didn't deny it. We spoke to them.
Oh, you spoke to them.
Yeah,
okay.
after that we spoke to them. We said, did you post it, and what did you want to say? And did
Okay.
someone ask you to post? So, you know, there was a journalistic work after that. But what we wanted to show that our journalists after that put those 3 posts into ChatGPT and asked, what similarity do you see in these posts? And then we received some kind of, you know, explanations. That was a little bit interesting for us, you know, from journalistic point of view. Otherwise, you know, it was the story was very simple. Deputies posted almost the same thing on social media. And social media, you were asking about the role of social media. Social media played a role of kind of platform where people share their opinion, discuss the issue, and like it was like in always it played. And we today, journalists, you know, we cannot imagine our work without the role of social media, because we are all there. Yeah, we do not almost consume traditional, you know,
Newspapers,
for example, newspapers or TV news. No one is waiting until 7 p.m. to watch what happened today in the world. You know, it should be on demand, and social media plays a #1 role in that. Of course, yeah.
So the danger is always there that such deep fakes will be there, and fake news will take hold, so to speak. And it's very difficult, because with your journalistic integrity, you were able to go and ask these parliamentary members, but someone else isn't going to go and call your parliamentary member and say, hey, did you really post this? So it could have not been.
Yeah, that was a second example that I gave. But the first example, maybe you were talking about that one, that, you know, there was a governor. He is governor of like big region of the country, which borders with Russia, Kostanay. And he appeared on the video talking something that later his office said it's not him. That was like deep fake.
Exactly.
You know? And that was a problem. And the problem was, as Ambassador mentioned earlier, about the literacy as well. The problem of, you know, lack of knowledge about AI. Even though media reports later labeled as our colleague said earlier about labeling, you know, content which was created or generated by AI. People didn't look at that, or looked at that, but didn't even, you know, care. They were discussing, like many of them were praising. Yes, he is right. You know, even though they knew that it was not him who was speaking in the real video.
Well, thank you very much. That gives us a little bit more background information, and also the role of social media, which is really important in all this. I'd like to now turn to Frau Meinhart. Thank you very much for your passionate speech for journalistic work, and I can only underscore that. And by the way, iGlobe News also does not use AI in anything we do. Just because everyone else mentioned that, I thought I should mention that as well. You're true. AI is not going to go to a war zone, as you mentioned, and AI is maybe not going to stand up for the small guy. So I wanted to talk with you and ask you how important it is for your real journalists to remain in existence so that democracies have a chance to survive in the future.
Maybe I can tell a story.
Please do.
Because as I was preparing for this panel, I came across the story that the Washington Post, I think yesterday, published, and the article had the title, "Journalist Died in the Russian Detention Center She Was Trying to Expose." And this also brings me to the solidarity you brought up. The title actually tells the story. It is about the reporter Victoria Roshinya. I'm not sure if I spell it correct. It's an Ukrainian 27-year-old reporter who uncovered a network of secret detention centers in occupied Ukraine. And she disappeared in August 23. And it turned out that she was detained, tortured, and killed in one of those detention centers. And after her death, and that's the important point now, the International Network Forbidden Stories continued her research. And this collective the Washington Post is part of it, has set itself the task to follow stories of colleagues who have been killed. Mm-hmm. And I think this solidarity is very, very important, because we have journalists who do their job, and they do it courageous, they do it correct, they do it with full integrity. But when they are killed, the story stops. No, they don't stop, because we have this collective, and we have still the research going on. And I think that's so important. I'm not afraid that journalists stop doing their job. I think, okay, we should use AI as tools, and we should use them carefully. But I'm afraid that the public doesn't care if it's AI generated or not. And
which goes to the point that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's why I said we need you. We need the public. We need the readers. We need the listeners.
Yes.
Because without that, it's like democracy needs Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So without friends of democracy, we are done. And that's the same with journalists. And that, I think, solidarity, also international solidarity, but also the solidarity of organizations, of every one of us, is very important. Did I answer your question? What was it?
Yes, well, it was a very good answer. Thank you very much for that one. Thank you. So before we open up the floor, so I'm sure many of you have many questions, I still have a question for Director Griffen. Thank you very much also for highlighting what IPI does. But I also wanted to touch on something that I think you mentioned, a number of our panelists mentioned, namely how AI is going to cost journalists jobs just by the mere fact that they're pretty efficient in what they do. A recent LinkedIn survey has shown that 32% of journalists are concerned about how AI will affect their job security. And you had mentioned in your speech about vested interests behind AI, and of course the bottom line always matters, and then the issue of advertising revenue also always, which also was mentioned on the panel a couple of times. So in your opinion, how will AI affect the workforce in media houses? Who will lose their job, and who will be safe moving forward?
It's a good question. I don't think we know, but maybe just to start with the question about vested interests, I think that, journalism has an essential role, and I said this already, in investigating AI itself. Who is behind AI? Who stands to gain from AI? Who profits from this revolution, and who doesn't? And I also think that journalism has an important role in explaining that in a democracy, it's up to us to set the rules about AI, not the other way around. And so I think these issues, journalists have to be able to explain, and they should be really, I think, deeply invested in covering these stories right now, including this issue of labor and journalism. I don't know that I can say which
who's
journalists,
so
whose job will be saved. I don't think that we know yet, because I don't think we have the full picture yet. But what I do think is interesting, and is that we, at IPI we have a historical archive going back to 1950, and one of the things that you see over and over again is that these concerns about the survival of journalists and journalism, it's not a new question. Mm-hmm. So, people were asking, will journalism survive television? They asked, will journalism survive teletext? They asked, will journalism survive the internet? And journalism did survive. It changed, obviously. It evolved. The ways that people consume news and information evolve. But journalism is still there. So I think that, the optimistic interpretation of the situation is that journalism will also survive this in some way. It will look different. It will look different. But I think that, that we also have to have this kind of hope, and I think history can also offer some hope in that sense as well, that journalism will survive, and especially investigative enterprise journalism, which, Edith, you were asking these questions about, can AI do this, and as a layperson, I can't say what artificial general intelligence will bring in 100 years, but I think we want to say no, that AI can't carry out these tasks, these fundamental tasks of journalism. So again, I can't say with certainty which jobs will survive, but I do think that journalism will survive.
Okay, well, on that positive note, thank you very much. I will open up the floor and be very happy if many of you have many questions, and you can, please. Hold on, I think you're getting a, yes.
Thank you. Thank you all for your excellent remarks and stories and examples. I just wondered, since you've talked about tech companies and also Ambassador Braathu mentioned also the companies behind who own media as well, just what is the importance of each one of us actually paying for news in a day where we can get news on demand online and social media?
Are you directing it to a certain person? Anyone who wants to take it? Anyone who'd like to take the question, please.
Thank you. I'll give it a shot. No, isn't it a paradox? When our societies were much poorer and we had much fewer university-educated citizens, media people were willing to pay for their newspapers, and they were actually reading newspapers. They were reading longer stories. Newspapers 30 years ago didn't have so many pictures, but they had a lot of text. So I find that paradox to be quite something. Are we ready to pay? Because I think that's the bottom line. Are we ready to pay for quality journalism? And I think many people are ready to pay, but maybe not enough for the companies to finance. Investigative journalism is extremely expensive. It needs such a dedication, such huge resources. And I think most media houses today simply don't have those resources. If we look at the changes that have happened over the past 20 years or so, newspapers that in the past had foreign correspondents no longer have foreign correspondents. It's a question. I don't know the answer to it, but I think there will always be a segment of the population who will want quality journalism. But will it be enough to sustain quality journalism? And then we come to something that is very much on my mind, is it reasonable that social media platforms are able to have huge profits based on circulating news produced by media, by newspapers, for example?
So the whole idea of copyright.
The whole copyright discussion.
They're using the information others produce to learn to use it in their algorithms.
I mean, and that's another question. I mean, the algorithms are using copyrighted material to develop their AI systems. But, Canada last year passed a law saying that social media platforms would have to pay a fee to Canadian news producers for recirculating their content. And what Meta did immediately was to block all news on their platform. Australia had the similar experience. So this tells, and my colleagues are telling me that the interest of the platforms is rapidly diminishing. I mean, some of my colleagues say it's non-existent, to have a conversation about human rights-centric curation or moderation. And I am going to have meetings with Meta and with others, but my colleagues are telling me don't be too optimistic because they simply don't have an interest. So bigger questions than we have answers, but I think we have to ask these questions, and we have to try to say to people, look, we benefit from quality journalism. We should all be willing to pay for subscribing to a newspaper or to a media outlet, but we're not there yet.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good way of putting it. Yes, please, in the back. Yes. Wait. You're getting a microphone. Yes.
Thank you. Fascinating discussion. And just following up on what was said, am I right, or do you know if I'm right, to understand that social media organizations are not obliged to follow any of the rules that traditional media have to follow in terms of journalistic standards, and their so-called justification is, well, we can't stop people posting things. But isn't it time to review that on the basis that if most people now are getting their news from these social media organizations, they are media organizations, and that's that?
Well, they've been very much resisting that. I don't know if you've been following that in the United States.
It's a political thing, isn't it?
It's an absolute political thing. Is there someone who would like to say a few words with that? Because that is a very hot topic. Frau Meinhart?
Yes, my point of view is that the algorithms are per se toxic for democratic public. So I don't know if we don't speak out that hard. So I think either we oblige platforms to follow the rules. I think it's not one way. We have to do everything. We the journalists have to make clear what's the difference between an Instagram post and the journalistic work. That's for the start. I think our media branch also made many mistakes. We thought, oh, that's nice, my story is circulating on Facebook, and we didn't reflect that we are working for them all the time, not being paid and feeding the timelines. So that's why I'm sitting here and explaining what is journalism and why do we need it. And I think we all have to do this. That's why my colleagues are here too. And then I think, I'm not sure if it's already too late, but I would like to have the means of production in our own hands. And we have not. All the media business plans depend on rules Meta or Google or anyone else made. So if they change the rule, our business models crash. So that's weird. I really think we should stop it, but who is we and how to stop, I don't know.
Well, it's a very good question. They have a lot of power, and they're very much resisting having that changed, as I'm sure you've been following. You had a question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. You really got me thinking here. One point is I really like that input to use AI to make journalism better. And I have a nice example because I think I recently heard a podcast with Ezra Klein, who explained how he produced a whole dossier about a very complicated question with 128 pages with perfect footnotes on a thing on which he used to employ an analyst for 3 or 4 days, and the quality was pretty much the same. And he needed that dossier to sort of speak, educatedly about a very complicated topic, right? And I've recently had a similar experience in a circle where medical people and philosophers and so on discuss, these big ideas about medicine all the time. And also somebody used that technique to really, really enhance our discussion. So that leads me really to the fundamental problem that I think somehow is interesting because it parallels the problem of journalism and the problem of politics. In politics, we have all these parties who say what the people want to hear, so they get elected, right? But, so for example, the people are a little bit racist, so I'm also a little bit racist, so I get the votes, right? But what I actually should do as a politician, I should educate the people and tell them not to be racist, because it's, first of all, it's really mean, and secondly, it's really not good for society or for everyone else, right? And I think journalists very often do the same thing. They write because they want people to like what they write, and then they write what they think people, will want to hear. But actually, journalists should have this mission to educate. I think that in investigative journalism, this is obviously the case, but I think in many other topics it's not, and they are also playing the same game that opportunistic politicians play. And obviously, then you use artificial intelligence. It's a great tool for that, right? So how do you enforce that kind of awareness, this kind of responsibility?
So you're talking about the ethics, ethics in politics, ethics in journalists. I mean, it's a very big question. But to your point, of course, when you know what you're talking about and you're reading a summary, that's something different than just putting it out there and not knowing what you're talking about, because that's something that you mentioned as well. If you don't know what the facts are, then you could believe anything they put in front of you. So would anyone like to say
Maybe
something?
one more remark, because, for example, there's no curriculum about, how to use AI in journalism, but there are already pretty good courses about very specific things. Have you ever heard of for example, of prompt engineering? That's a thing. Prompt engineering. How do you write the question in such a way that AI actually gives you a good answer, a usable answer?
Okay.
And this is just one of many techniques that one can use. So I think maybe this is something that's also something.
So that will be maybe a course in the
invest some time
future.
in.
A course in the future.
My opinion on that. Thank you for it's very, I think, important question. And Director Griffen, I think, partly answered to that. Saying that we need to investigate who is behind AI. Because, if it is algorithm based and what kind of code you wrote, what's the constitution behind it? What, overall, sometimes when you ask something from just ChatGPT, it might lie. And when you say, hey, this is not true, and it's a good catch, so that at the end of the day, we are journalists working. The trust is very important for us. Trust in us, in our work, what we do. We try to find truth, tell truth, the story, and when you don't trust to the machine, which sometimes lies, and you don't know what's interest of it, who put what kind of interest behind it. If public knows about it, the real journalism will survive. If we, summarizing, yeah? Like in real journalism, public service journalism, what we are working for keeping trust. Trust is extremely important for journalists.
Very important. Trust is very important. Yes, good point. At the back of the room.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Doorov about the work of the Radio Freedom Europe. When it comes to collaborations with different actors, do you have any collaborations with the NGOs, for example, factcheck.kz, when it comes to disinformation, work with disinformation? This would be my first question. And the second question would be, is there any kind of collaboration with the government when it comes to the misinformation coming from pro-Russian channels and media platforms? Because at least on paper, at least in their mottos, the governments, for example, Kazakhstani government is saying that they are against the war and against anything related to that.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, we cooperate with other media companies in Kazakhstan, including FactCheck.kz and others. There are a lot of now new independent small media companies who also run fact-check projects. If something happens or some politician made a statement or some news, and they follow up and investigate the question. And we had several occasions with FactCheck.kz and others to work together, and it's very fruitful. And I hope it will continue. About the government, we do not have cooperation on like daily work. What our relationship is related to mainly accreditation, because as a foreign media company, we get accreditation for our journalists, and it has been a challenging question, and it continues to be challenging for us. but we still operate. We have dozens of journalists in the country, throughout the country, and I think the Kazakh government also understands the importance of what Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty does in Kazakhstan in terms of telling news, real events in different parts of the country. That is why I think we will continue, and there is, you briefly touched the question of propaganda, Kremlin propaganda in the country. It's not only in Kazakhstan, but entire Central Asia. For entire Central Asia, it's a great challenge currently. In every household, you can easily watch all channels are Russian channels, and there's almost no alternative if people do not have alternative sources from internet, where we are actually, and we try to give a different perspective of events, what's happening with Russia, with Ukraine, and in the world. So yes, we definitely continue that question, that topic. We have several projects related to working against propaganda, Kremlin propaganda, to decolonization projects in the country. So yeah, it's an important question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You over here in the front, please.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I have a question.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Again, thank you very much to all the panelists. I have two questions. The first is, do we need global regulation of AI? The second is, can unregulated AI start wars?
Who would like to take the question?
Well, maybe I can just take the first part of the question. I have no answer to the second part, but I hope not. I think we do need a global compact on AI. Regulation is probably going to be more difficult given the current state of the world and the declining support for multilateralism. I'm a believer in multilateralism. I think it's brought great benefits to our societies over very many years, but the multilateral framework seems to be, I won't say disintegrating, but it's certainly not as strong as it used to be. And there are strong forces, political forces, trying to dismantle multilateral structures. So to get some UN agreement, some binding agreement, I think is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult even in the OSCE. But I think we have to try. We have to try to have a compact, a shared understanding of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable when it comes to AI and media, for example. I just have to use the opportunity to say I have to leave. I have to catch an airplane, and I'm running a bit late. So thank you, and I apologize, but the plane won't wait for me. I have to be there. So thank you, and I will just have to run.
Yes,
so,
but thank you for your final answer. Thank you very much. So maybe we'll take the last few questions, and then we'll go on to. Back in the back of the room, please. And then there's one more here. So we'll do these two more, and then we'll move to the next. Thank you, Ambassador Braathu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the discussion. I have a question, and I have a story for that. My question is regarding the fake news and the education side of the same coin, I guess. Imagine that there is a person in the street or posting on social media, obviously untrue thing, obviously fake news. And what to do with such person? Because maybe he is actually believing what he's saying. Therefore, it's not fake news, it's just his own opinion. And as a friend of mine said, everybody has a right to be stupid, and everybody has the right to say it out loudly. But if it is obviously wrong, and it's like triggering a public action, so let's say that he's stating something that he believes is a fact, and he's calling an action based on that. So it's impacting the public, but it's obviously wrong. But if he's believing that, then it's, yeah, he's right to be stupid. But in the meanwhile, it affects society. I don't know if understanding what I would like to say and how
I understand what you're trying to say. I mean, there are limits to freedom of expression, those being if you have hate speech or you're inciting to violence. But there's no protection against stupidity or someone who just doesn't know the facts. But maybe someone would like to...
I mean, I think, Diana, you've already hinted at the answer, which is that, you know, there are rules that exist about, you know, freedom of expression does have limits. And I think that, you know, it depends on the particular case, of course, whether, you know, yes, everyone has the right to be stupid or to lie or to say things that are not true. If there are, but however, of course, there can be consequences to those actions, and there are limits even in certain cases, and those limits are defined by laws and treaties and regulations that exist to protect the right to free expression, and while also protecting the rights of others. So maybe I actually the point that I want to make is a slightly different one, but I think that is the answer, which is that it is exactly these types of rules and conventions that are now under threat. And I think the woman who asked the question about regulations left the room as well. But we have a system. There already exists a system for protecting free expression and for balancing freedom of expression with other rights. But it is this system and these regulations that are under threat, as well as other types of global rules and really the rules-based order. And we see this now across the board in many different ways that affects the freedom of safety of journalists. I think to bring it back to press freedom a little bit, thinking in particular about journalists in conflict who are civilians and obviously should never be targeted, but we see these types of rules being flouted as well. So I think an important point, which maybe isn't a direct answer to your question, is that we do have a system for protecting free expression. We do have rules that exist that can also be applied to many of the conversations that we are having and to many of the topics that we are talking about, but those are under threat. And I think that in addition to working to protect those rules, we also need to ask why those rules are under threat, and that again is a job for journalists and journalism.
Go ahead.
I think very important is what you already mentioned, the reporting on the structures and the power balance of tech platforms and tech companies, because the question is in whose interest are you stupid? Because sometimes you are spreading word that is part of an organized campaign to destabilize societies. So it's always good to know in whose, you think it's your opinion, but where did you get your opinion from? You're not from outer space. So I think the more reporting we have on the background, on the dynamics and on fake news, how are they created, in whose interest, and I mean we have statal actors on this field. It's not just people spreading weird things. It's also states and secret agencies who say, I want to target this country, I want to target this form of society.
Okay,
yeah, I completely agree. And we see journalists and media organizations being targeted in often what are not just people, but they're actually campaigns behind them.
Yeah.
And this is something also that needs to be increasingly investigated.
Thank you. Well, now we have 2 questions. So 2 more questions. We'll take them both at the same time and we'll do one more round. So please.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, thought-provoking. I've always operated on the principles of see, judge, act. So often when we try to see to get information, we do it with a judgment in mind. We try and get the facts to support our opinion when we already know what we want to do as action. One of the opportunities I see with AI is that there could well be greater scope for actually getting the raw facts before they're then judged or opinion formed. So I actually see as much opportunity as threat. Now, linked to that, of course, it's always who owns. And that has been, it's the same question for the past hundreds of years, whether it's press barons, whether it's people fit to own newspapers, and now it's AI. And the only thing certain is that the people with money, power, and influence, no matter what regulation is put into place, will find a way to create a new structure to buy back their freedoms. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be trying to put controls and regulation in place, because it's a constant moving battle. But I don't think we can expect it to be a battle that is won or settled or somehow become static, because it'll guarantee to change. And I think we ought to remember in this debate that it is going to be very, very dynamic, just as it always has been. And if anything, it'll simply become more dynamic. And maybe spending 10 years settling some rules that went out of date 5 years ago may not be a very sound tactic.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But there are people with money and power that do have ethics too, so they're not all bad, I just want to say. We'll take the second question as well, and then we'll answer it all together. But thank you very much for your comment.
Yes. Thank you. That's the demand for more rules is often due to the lack of moral leadership. My first point is not a question, but more a statement, because the moral leadership is very very tense with the staying in power. And as 95% of the ones in power are male, we might want to take a look at that. The second one is, why don't you embrace it? I think it is there. The AI is fully there. So just keeping it out of the journalistic world in one way or the other, that is not going to get journalism into the next era. I fully agree with Mr. Griffen that I'm very optimistic that journalism will survive, just as a lot. But I think prompt engineering, as the gentleman earlier said, it's not going to be a course, it's going to be a skill you learn in kindergarten. So why don't you fully embrace it and see where it can take you?
Who would like to take the final two questions, or maybe many of you would like to say something to the last two statements?
Yeah, if I may, only short. Yeah, as I earlier said, we are entering a beautiful world, actually. It's a beautiful world. It has lots of opportunities for creating, tools for our job to make it easier, interesting. That is why we are learning from it a lot in terms of getting some kind of inspiration to see different forms of it. But I think the question is today what we heard a lot, and I agree with it, that this is more about whether that will later dictate or formulate the opinion, public opinion, in majority, in the bigger scale, or whether journalists and humans, let's say, be in charge of it. That's a more kind of ethical question. That is why we were probably discussing more about need of some kind of ethical code of ethics, or
exactly
what we discussed now. Otherwise, yes, this is, for me, it's a tool. It's a great tool. If it makes my work easy and interesting and beautiful, why can't I use? But I have to check what it gives to me before publishing it. That's my main kind of,
takeaway.
Yeah, takeaway.
Thank you very much. Please, Frau Meinhart.
I would like to add, yes, it could be a beautiful work, but also very frightening because it's a very powerful technology. So we should not embrace it consciousness, but we should know what we are doing, because this same technology that helps us doing our job better and to summarize huge amounts of paper is also suitable to target journalists, to track their social media activities and to expose vulnerable groups in the society in a very dangerous way. And this Ukrainian reporter, I don't know how she was found. She was very experienced reporter. So maybe AI was used to track her. Drones were used, we don't know. But I just wanted to say it's really double-faced.
Absolutely, and of course AI is also used in weaponry, we all know that, so it's a very dangerous technology. Would you also like to say anything? Otherwise I will summarize it, but please.
I think I would just add that, I mean, for me, it comes down to setting the conditions in which you embrace this technology, and that can be the conditions within journalism, and you think about codes of ethics, and then it's the conditions within society based on the legal framework that you create. I mean, lots of things exist, and then we create rules and regulations to govern how they can be used in society based on risks and benefits. And we already see, you know, organizations like the EU defining what is high-risk artificial intelligence. And one of them, for example, is high-risk surveillance tools like facial recognition, which is being used has already been used to track journalists. So I think that's my answer, I guess, is that we have to be the ones to set the rules and conditions by which these technologies are embraced, because I'm sure their use will increase by journalists and by all of us.
Herr Rosenauer, noch ein paar Wörter?
Yeah, I mean, do you hear me now?
Are you up?
So, since most of my career I will be dealing with these tools, I am strategically optimistic that we'll find a way to include them in our work in a meaningful way. But then again, just personally, I feel like we always try to balance innovation and a regulation. But I think if you really want to regulate, you can't regulate without breaking things as well. So maybe we have to also show some boundaries that might be too strict at first, and then we can also always relax them later rather than just letting the horse go. That's just a very personal thing, because also the idea that in kindergarten this is just ubiquitous, that the kids are in front of the tablets using AI, is not something I feel comfortable yet with that idea. Might change in some years, but I think it's also fine to take it slow, because technology advances extremely fast anyway.
Thank you. That being said, I would like to thank everyone for coming, sharing World Press Freedom Day with us, having this very important discussion. I think we highlighted some dangers, but also some opportunities here, and we all had a very strong voice for journalists moving forward. And there will be a small reception next door, and I think we've been invited. And Brigitta, do you want to? Thank you very much.